All right, how's it going, everyone? We are starting our biological basis of behavior unit. So today we are going to start by talking about the neurons. So basically, when we are talking about neurons, what we are looking at is we are looking at the way in which our brain communicates with the rest of our body. So I like to think of the brain as a router that connects you to the internet, to everything that you do. And I want you to think of neurons as Ethernet cables that connect to the rest of your body. So your brain does not communicate via Wi-Fi. It's not just sending messages out into the ether for your fingers to pick up. Basically, there are neurons, these little cellular connections that send messages from your brain all the way down to your fingers, to your toes, to whatever you are doing. So this is how your brain communicates, and it's a electrochemical process that we'll talk a little bit about there at the end. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about each individual part of the neuron, and then talk about its function, and then we'll talk about how the neuron actually works and functions, and we'll talk about neurotransmitters and the like. So let's get started. So what we have here is we have a picture of the neuron, and we're just going to go to each individual part, talk about what it is. So let's start on the left-hand side here with the dendrites. Okay, so simply put, dendrites are these long branch-like protrusions from that extend out from the neuron. Their job is to receive the message. So basically, the brain or other neurons are going to be passing information along, and these dendrites reach out, they grab that information, and they pull it into themselves. So dendrites, simply put, their job is to receive information. Okay, so anyone who's been in a biology class, you should remember what the nucleus is. This is the brain of the neuron, tells it what to do, keeps it informed of what its job is, passing things along. It's in charge. Okay. Next, we have the cell body. Okay, this is also known as the soma, S-O-M-A, the soma, and its job is basically just to keep the neuron alive. So it takes in sustenance, it excretes waste, and it protects the neuron from outside sources. So just keeping the neuron alive, it's kind of like the body of it. After that, we have what is known as the axon. Okay, so the axon is the pathway in which the message travels. So if my brain, once again, wants my fingers to twiddle or to move, that message goes from the brain all the way down, and that pathway is where the axon. So in the end, this isn't a very good picture of what a motor neuron would look like. So a motor neuron would be one that connected to my brain to a certain muscle. And the reason for that is because the axon in reality would be much, much longer. So if you took a soma or a cell body and you had it about the size of a basketball, what you would then need to do is you would need to have a rope that was about 2 to 2.5 miles long attached to the basketball and stretched out, and that would be your axon. So when I'm telling you, hey, the axon is, this is a bad picture, it's really long, it's a pathway, well, just think about that basketball and the axon. It's got a long distance to travel. You have neurons in your body where the axons extend from your shoulder down to your arm, from your hip down to your ankle at the cellular level. So it's really, really, really long. And once again, that's message is getting from point A to point B, and it does that through the axon. So what you'll see covering or surrounding parts of the axon is known as the myelin sheath. The myelin sheath is a fatty tissue that surrounds the axon, and basically its job is simply to help the message travel faster. It's got a long distance to go, and so whenever the electrical charge hits the myelin sheath, it helps boost that charge and have it move along faster. Now, this is something that can be difficult to explain, like, well, this is, we're just used to being able to move and do things. But a person that has multiple sclerosis, which is a degenerative disorder that damages the myelin sheath. Basically, the myelin sheath is dying over a period of time. People with multiple sclerosis, it really slows down their ability to, have motor functions, and you get to points where they don't have a lot of movement functionality, very shaky. Oftentimes, you'll see them on walkers, the four little stand walkers that generally really old people use, but this will be someone who's in their 30s or 40s, and basically what's happening is their brain is trying to communicate for their body to do stuff, but the messages are taking too long to go, so they'll end up being really shaky, and it just doesn't work out very well. So last, and possibly least, we have the axon ending, axon terminal, terminal button, synaptic knot. For some reason, no one could figure out what to call this thing. So axon terminal is what I will generally call it in class, or on a test, but you never know what the APs are going to do. So the axon terminal is simply where the message is passed on. So you have the dendrite receiving the message, passing through the soma all the way through the axon, and then out the axon terminal. And this is released to some other neuron, to a specific muscle, kind of just the end product. Okay. Now, neurons don't actually ever touch. So you can see here we have our nucleus, cell body. This is the traveling axon as it extends out. Here you see axon terminals. And this comes down, this axon terminal comes down and comes to this end. And you can see that this is blown up and that there's a space in between two neurons. Neurons don't actually ever touch. And this space is known as the synapse, and simply put, that's all the synapse is. It is the space in between two neurons in which neurotransmitters pass back and forth. So when you take a closer look at this on this little diagram here, we have what are known as vesicles. Vesicles are basically fluid-filled sacs that carry different types of neurotransmitters, and so when a message gets sent through the neuron, it gets to the end, to the axon terminal, the vesicles will release their neurotransmitters into the synaptic gap, the synapse, also known as the synaptic gap. We have lots of names that overlap for no reason. Okay, now inside of each of these are neurotransmitters, and you'll take a look at neurotransmitters in your readings, but neurotransmitters are simply chemicals that house very specific batches of information. They tell different things, and so those get passed down, those get sent out, attach themselves to the dendrites and release their information. Okay, so next we have a process known as reuptake. So when you are looking at these neurotransmitters, you can see the vesicles here. When they do release their neurotransmitters, those neurotransmitters go to the dendrites and attach themselves there. Now think of this as like a food truck, like a 18-wheeler truck full of supplies. Like when those go to their specific places, the 18-wheelers don't stay there. They deposit their food at HEB or Lowe's or wherever. They deposit their stuff at the place, and then once they're done depositing, they don't stay there. They go back to the original neuron, to the axon terminal, to get refurbished and redone. And this is what is known as reuptake. It's just this process of the recycling of neurotransmitters. So once again, neurotransmitters are released from the axon terminal. They attach themselves to the dendrite. They release their message, and then they get recycled back into their old axon terminal, and that's simply called reuptake. Okay, so when we are looking at neurotransmitters, there are two major types of neurotransmitters, both excitatory and inhibitory. and they do exactly what they say. Excitatory neurotransmitters excite, they increase the energy levels inside of a neuron, and inhibitory neurotransmitters decrease the energy levels. So basically what happens is when I want my fingers to twiddle or to do whatever, the brain is going to send excitatory neurotransmitters to the different neurons, and that information is going to get passed on to all of the different neurons that do this. But once I'm done doing this, the messages have to slow down and stop. The motor movement has to stop, and so inhibitory neurotransmitters are going to get sent, and that is then going to slow down the movement and stop me from doing that thing. Or at the end of the day, when my brain's I'm trying to go to sleep and my brain's racing, hopefully my brain will be trying to put out inhibitory neurotransmitters to help me fall asleep and to slow down all of my thinking and stuff like that. So remember, excitatory neurotransmitters increases the likelihood of a message. Inhibitory neurotransmitters decrease the likelihood of a message being sent. So speaking of the messages being sent, we need to talk about the actual process that happens here. So simply put, we are going to start at what is known as resting membrane potential. So you have this over here, resting membrane potential. Most of the time, I just call it resting potential. I don't often call it resting membrane potential. So with resting potential, basically all this means is that your neuron is ready to send a message. It's ready to fire. It's ready to go. And once it's ready to go, it's just waiting for, my fingers are just waiting for the brain to tell it to, do whatever. Okay, so what's going to happen is when my brain decides to send excitatory neurotransmitters to the motor neurons that connect to my fingers, what's going to happen is the first set of excitatory neurotransmitters are going to increase the level of energy that is inside of the neuron until it hits what is known as the threshold, and that just covers it. What is known as the threshold, and the threshold is the minimum level of stimulus needed in order for an action potential to actually happen. And just think of an action potential as the message traveling through the neuron. So the action potential, or excuse me, the threshold is kind of that minimum level of stimulus. Once that minimum level of stimulus hits, there's a burst of energy, and that's the action potential. And this right here, all of this is just the message traveling through the neuron. So you have that burst of energy. Think of it like a roller coaster where it gets shot out at the beginning of a ride, and then it's just going to use physics to kind of go through the rest, and that's what's happening here. There's a burst of energy to get it out the gate, and then physics is going to kind of take care of the rest. It's not really physics, but you get the drift. Once again, threshold, if you don't hit that threshold, nothing is going to happen. So there's a concept known as all or nothing. So let's say that my brain sends some messages, but not a lot. And so we have excitatory neurotransmitters coming up, but it never quite hits that threshold. The end result is that nothing is ever going to happen. This could go on till infinity, for your entire life, and nothing would happen. And so when we talk about all or nothing, we have got to hit that threshold in order to have an action potential. Otherwise, nothing is ever going to happen. So think of it like flushing a toilet. If you press the lever down halfway, nothing's really going to happen, and you're not going to flush the toilet. And so you need to go all the way down, hit that threshold, in order for the toilet to actually flush. Once your action potential happens, once you flush the toilet, you have that action potential, and then once it's done, you have a period of time here, section 4, you have a period of time here known as the refractory period. Simply put, this is just a rest period where you cannot have another action potential. your neuron needs a break. It needs a moment to rest, and then it will get the chance to fire another action potential, but not beforehand. Okay, so this is these are neurons, and yeah, if you have any questions, you can always come and ask me. But otherwise, good luck.